Hello, my name is Tatiana Kachkovskaia, and I'm presenting the talk entitled Typical and Rare Post-Nuclear Melodic Movements in Russian. This is a part of a 2-year project on prosodic phenomena at IP boundaries. The research is done at the Department of Phonetics, St. Petersburg State University, Russia. In this slide, you can see the famous tadpole description of English post-nuclei. The tadpole itself shows the nucleus, while the dot after it describes the post-nucleus, or tail. The tails are in focus of this presentation. It is generally accepted that tail movements are automatic. It is the type of nucleus that determines tail movements. This is probably why tails are poorly explored. Most descriptions are rather schematic and, as we will see later, do not correspond well to what we really see in the melodic curve. This slide shows the simplified view of Russian nuclei, taken from the Toby-like description Tori, suggested by Cecilia O'Day. The dashed lines here mark the boundaries of the stressed syllable. The descriptions for the tails are simplified here as well. So our goal was to obtain more detailed descriptions with special attention to interspeaker variability. In this presentation we will discuss 4 of these melodic patterns. To prevent further questions, I will say that HL star reveals similar trends as L star. And concerning pattern H star M, I should say that it is arguable in Russian traditional linguistics, and because of that, we haven't analyzed it so far. So let's begin. L star. L star is a low fall which occurs in utterance final IPs of declarative sentences, in utterance medial IPs with a weak syntactic link with the next IP, such as with a semicolon, before lists, such as with a colon, and someplace else. The level tail movement, as in the traditional descriptions, is indeed the most frequent in our material. An example of level tail you can see in the slide. We can also listen to the example with low level tail.
И она проглотила эту несправедливость.
However, we also found quite a lot of examples where F0 continues to go down after the nucleus, and this is not rare. As you can see from the statistics, one of the speakers, A, even prefers falling tail to level. In some cases, we found an extra rise fall on the last word, after the nucleus. This is an example of an extra rise fall.
И в других областях. И в других областях.
Such rise falls are too low in interval to be noticed, but they seem to add a feeling of a sort of additional finality to the sentence. It sounds as if the speaker wants to go on falling, but in order to fall even lower, he or she has to go a little bit up first. Another nuclear pattern, H star L, also revealed examples of such extra rise fall. H star L is the most frequent pattern in Russian. It is a rise fall that occurs in yes-no questions and utterance medially. In this example, the nucleus falls on the word взрослого, but there is also a small rise fall on the final word. Now we can listen to the example.
Потому что у каждого взрослого в нашей семье. Потому что у каждого взрослого в нашей семье.
This tail movement is also rare and also speaker dependent. Just like with L star, speaker A uses additional rise falls more often, while it is never observed for speaker C. Now let's go on. L star H. L star H is a low rise used in contrastive questions like "What about you?" and sometimes utterance medially, especially in lists. Our analysis has shown that the tail is not necessarily high right away. F0 rise can actually stretch across the post-nucleus. Please listen to the example here.
Отец был выше Ивана. Отец был выше Ивана.
The rising movement is actually quite frequent. For example, speaker M uses it almost as often as level high tail. Another variant of tail is gradual fall. This can be quite frequent, but depends strongly on the speaker. A gradually falling tail is also observed in another pattern. H*H is a high rise used in certain types of exclamations like "what a nice dress you've got", and sometimes utterance medially, especially in lists. Now let's listen to the example.
Что век свой хочет. Что век свой хочет.
It is worth noting here that despite the fact that the interval may be very broad, here it's 9 semitones, the tone will never go as low as the beginning of the rise. This variant is even more frequent than level high tail, but we suppose that the reason for this is simply the phenomenon of melodic declination, which obviously goes on after the nucleus. So, going back to the simplified melodic patterns for Russian, we can now add more information on tail movements. To sum up, 1. The patterns ending in low F0 may have an additional small rise-fall in the post-nucleus. 2. The patterns ending in high F0 may have a gradually falling tail, which is explained by declination. And in L*H, the rise may be stretched across several syllables of the post-nucleus. Now, what about perception of tail movement? Do listeners pay attention to it or not? What if we change the tail, breaking the rules that we have just described? Using Psola and Pratt, we modified the natural recordings, actually breaking these rules. This table presents the modifications we have done. For each of the 4 nuclei, we selected a phrase with the most common tail. Then, level low tail was modified into rising, falling into level high and into rising, level high into falling and rising. We can listen to a few examples. L*, initially level low.
Мы не стали бы спрашивать.
The tail was modified into rising.
Мы не стали бы спрашивать.
And another example, L*H, level high tail,
Прямота много искупает.
was modified into falling.
Прямота много искупает.
In an online perceptual experiment, we asked native Russian listeners to compare 2 recordings. It was the same phrase, and in some pairs the stimuli were identical, while in some pairs one of the stimuli was modified. After each pair, we asked listeners, are the recordings identical? If not, for each recording, does it sound natural? Does it sound unnatural? Not Russian. And does it have additional connotations? If yes, please specify. There were 21 participants in total. In most cases, participants heard the difference when one of the stimuli was modified. The exact number is given on the right after slash. The modified stimuli were often marked as unnatural. Interestingly, falling to low after L*H did not sound that unnatural, 3 out of 20. And this is another proof that this particular pattern can be pronounced with a falling tail. Many participants could not formulate particular connotations even when they heard something unusual. In general, rising tails were associated with non-finality and sounded like a question. Some modifications caused emotional connotations. This is all for now. Thank you for your attention.